Okay, hey, sorry for the delay. I hadn't shared my presentation properly. So I'm here to talk about security, in particular on what can teams do to be more secure when they develop their smart contracts, and what can they do to have them audited or tested or whatever. So just quickly about me. I'm from a distributed systems background. I moved into cybersecurity at some point, and now I run two companies, well, one company under one legal entity, Oak Security and Solidified. We are called Solidified in the Solidity Ethereum ecosystem for obvious reasons, and Oak Security in other ecosystems. So we've been around since 2017. We've audited more than 200 large projects, and we have a methodology which we consider slightly unique, but I'm not here to talk about methodologies. I'm here to talk about auditing in general. And auditing really became a thing after the 2016 DAO attack. When I used to talk about this, most people in the room knew what the DAO was. But since there's like a new generation now, sometimes people don't. So I recommend everyone who doesn't know to read about it. But basically, it was the first time re-entrancy and other security issues became public knowledge or public awareness. And people like us and our competitors started to provide services for security audits of smart contracts. And if we forward to 2023, I just looked at the statistics of the month of June, I think. There were 3 big exploits of re-entrancy, the same attack vector already used in 2016. And that's a bit surprising because it's not difficult to protect your smart contracts against re-entrancy, at least these days. So there's certainly a part of the message that still hasn't gone through. And if we look at the Rect front page, Rect is sort of a news aggregator for blockchain exploits, and we see there were 8 exploits in a single month. That's a snapshot from 6th of September, but it looked very similar now. And another thing we can see on the Rect leaderboard is that 8 out of the 10 top exploits were of unaudited projects, right? So these projects have not been audited. That doesn't mean that audited projects cannot be exploited, but it's certainly an interesting fact. So what are smart contract audits? So a very simple definition is that a smart contract audit is a time-box security review of the smart contract, a code review basically, by a security expert or a number of security experts. There are a lot of methodologies around and a lot of tooling involved, and every company works slightly different. But it's important that it's an external team, right? And it's important to go at an audit with a certain mindset. So the mindset of breaking things is not exactly the same as building things, right? So a lot of developers don't make very good auditors, and a lot of auditors make very good developers. So there's a certain mindset involved, and it needs to be a fresh mindset, someone who doesn't know the project or is not biased in any way. Audits are very good at detecting certain things, like re-entrancies, and maybe some more fundamental economic flaws, but they're very bad at detecting certain things that could be easily found in testing. That means there's no guarantees, right? We generally, I don't know any audit company that provides a guarantee, but in general it cannot be given because there are a lot of other steps projects must take to be secure. So it's one step in a chain of methods or steps. An alternative to audits that have become popular recently are audit competitions. So in an audit, you have a team, maybe 3 or 4 auditors looking at a project very deeply. And in audit competition, it's open to anyone, right? So anyone can participate. The budget for the audit, it's usually time-boxed as well, but there's a budget, and that's split between the findings. It's an interesting model. I'll compare it to traditional audits in a minute. But just for completeness, there's also bug bounties. So bug bounty is what you do as a last resort. It's usually a lot of money involved. It basically means there's a price for reporting a bug instead of exploiting it. So the idea behind this is, you might want to convince a black hat to go white hat and not exploit it, but report it and get money in a legal way. That usually means the price needs to be quite high. So just comparing these, there's no single answer to this question, what is best, but there are certain differences and there are certain combinations that make sense. So an audit, usually if it's well done, is very deep. You get dedicated experts looking at everything, every single line of code until time is up. And usually if the time is up and we haven't got full confidence, we extend the time, right? So we want to have full confidence that we've gone through completely. In a competition instead, you get a lot of breadth, right? You get much more eyes, but you don't have any guarantees on who these eyes belong to, what experience they have, and also how deep they go. We have a lot of part-time auditors that we encourage to participate in competitions. And they all report the same thing, that they spend a certain amount of time in each competition and then move on, right? So it's like an 80-20 approach. It's not economic for them to go very deep. Another issue for them is that in an audit competition, if a project is really bad, the budget has to be split between more people, right? The more findings there, the less you receive. So in most audit competition platforms, the more you work, the less you get, right? So the harder the project is, the less benefit an auditor can get from it. And the bug bounty, I mean, the advantage is obvious. You don't get exploited. You get a bug report if everything goes well. But it's very expensive, right? So you should really only think about a bug bounty once you've done other steps. So now I quickly want to talk about our approach. This is not a sales presentation, so I want to keep it short and informative. But we've developed this process over many years, and we are trying to combine the benefits of the competition model with an audit, a traditional audit. So the way it works, we assign a number of experts to a project. The guiding principle is that 3 pairs of eyes need to look at every line of code. So that might mean 4 or 5 auditors, depending on how large the project is. And they all have a different background, and they apply their own methodology within our process, but we deliberately pick them that the methodologies and the approach they apply is different, so that we get a wider coverage. And it's also blinded in the way that these auditors, they speak to each other about architecture, design, things they don't understand, but they don't disclose their findings to each other until the end of the audit in a consensus meeting. And the idea behind this is, first of all, to avoid freeloading, because it's very easy to subconsciously skip a couple of lines of code if they're very difficult, thinking your colleague will cover them. But nobody wants to turn up at the consensus meeting having missed something important, so everyone looks very carefully. But more importantly, there's no bias, right? So it's very easy to bias each other, particularly if we noticed we can avoid a lot of false positives this way. And certainly we have quality control, right? So if we have a lot of overlap, we know that the audit has covered this fairly well. If there's a lot of difference between the finding and the auditors, we know that there's probably some understanding missing and we have to look deeper. And finally, our results are always transparent, right? We don't work with projects that don't want to publish a final audit report. So we always insist on publishing this. Okay, but that's enough about us. And I said before, audits, there's no guarantee. They can't find everything. And there are certain type of bugs that are extremely difficult to find in an audit. But there are other things projects should do before an audit, during an audit, and even after an audit. And the first thing is to try to help themselves in using the tooling that is available. Right now, there are a lot of security tools available in the Ethereum ecosystem in particular. Not so in others, but in Ethereum there are testing frameworks, unit testing. You should really get 100% code coverage. 100% meaningful code coverage, test coverage, sorry. It's very easy to do when you do it from the beginning. It's very hard to do when you do it retrospectively. And it's easy to do if you use an automated framework that integrates with your toolchain. Similarly, you can integrate a static code analyzer. They're very good these days in finding certain Solidity footguns. There's symbolic execution, and there's fuzz testing, which is very useful for larger projects such as economic models where there are interesting parameter combinations that could lead to strange results. The problem with tooling is that it's ideal for auditing a project from 2017, right? So the newer projects, the good teams already know this and use these tools, and they don't have standard Solidity exploits in their code base. What we do find in these audits are problems with the economic model or things like wrong implementations of the economic model, and these things are very difficult to find with automated tooling, with the exception of fuzz testing, which can be quite good for certain things. The other thing teams should do is look beyond smart contracts. So this is a slide I use when I teach about security, and there are sort of 5 areas I classify in a blockchain project that require attention in terms of security. First of all, the smart contracts. Then there's key management. Usually there are some keys that have to be managed, either on the user side or even on the admin side, if it's there's some admin involved. There's a lot of off-chain code, right? There are websites that connect to these smart contracts. There are databases. There are all sorts of off-chain software components. There's infrastructure. These things run on machines. They run on nodes. They run on networks. And there are humans involved, right? And every cybersecurity expert will know that humans are the worst sort of link in the chain of security. But only the first 2 are blockchain specific, right? And humans, they're sort of differently involved because we sort of have this idea of the intelligent user that manages their own keys, non-custodian type of usage. So they have a bit more responsibility. But other than that, that's traditional cybersecurity, right? So you have to apply all the traditional cybersecurity measures beyond smart contracts. And the final thing is projects should realize that they're building financial software, right? So most smart contract projects manage value. There's, even if it's not a DeFi project, let's say self-sovereign identity, even an identity as an asset and is valuable, right? So there's always something of value involved, so let's call it financial software. It's important to get domain experience, right? If you're building financial software, get someone with a finance background on your team. We see so many projects with very good programmers, but they don't have a single economist or finance expert, and they're building big financial economic models. Let's assume you have a finance expert and you build an economic model the right way. You need to document it, right? So there need to be specification and documents that make it clear to the developer what they have to implement. Quite often we find that the economic model is simply implemented in the wrong way, or a different model is implemented. Then, financial software is critical software. So you have to slow down. A lot of these smart contract projects are run like a mobile game startup, right? Go to market quickly, have several iterations. That's fine, but not for financial software, right? The finance sector, which we all try to get away from, the traditional finance, they've got 50 years of experience in developing software, and they are slow for a reason in that sense. Testing, very important. I've already mentioned it from the beginning. We see many projects that apply testing at the end. That's the wrong way to think about it. You need to do testing from day one. And above all, keep it simple, right? A lot of projects try to revolutionize the finance system all at once. Just build on incremental changes, one step at a time, incremental innovation. So that's all really I wanted to talk about. As I said, we audit, but we're not the only auditors. Obviously, you can find us here. You can find us on Twitter. And questions? Sure.
Thank you for the talk. I just wanted to know from your team and experience, what are the top 5 categories of problems that you have found in all the audits that you have done?
Well, I couldn't give you a good categorization at the top of my head, but probably most things we find these days are just simple logic bugs. It used to be when we audited in 2018 that we had a lot of wrong use of Solidity. That still happens, but it happens with not so experienced teams. The second biggest would probably be something like reentrancy, which is a traditional Solidity problem, but for some reason it keeps coming up in new ways. People not realizing that when they interact with other protocols or with other tokens, they are doing external calls. And things to do with project composability, assumptions on how other things work, and that they may never change. That's probably one of the top categories as well. But I couldn't list 5 now at the top of my head.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
This is more like, how do you become a professional auditor, and how do you build a career in this field for the long term?
So, I mean, we recruit a lot of people from audit competitions, people that make a name for themselves by bug bounties audit competitions, finding many things. But to get there, we always recommend the first step obviously is to learn the platform. So if you want to work on Solidity, learn Solidity and with all the things, then do the capture of flags that are available, the CTFs on various resources. The Securium bootcamp or whatever it's called is quite good as well. So, and then just build experience. It's easy to build experience these days because you have all these open platforms where you can just practice.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.